Right, well, good evening, everybody. First of all, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we live, work and play, pay our respects to elders, past, present and emerging, and recognise their continuous connection to these lands and waterways. We also acknowledge our shared responsibility to care for and protect our place and people. I will now declare the meeting open. The meeting is being webcast. Please make sure you respect that. Otherwise, you might find that open to defamation or other words of action. I have an apology to make, and that is that I'm suffering from a New Zealand bug, which I did declare on the way back through customs, and they let me in. Otherwise, you'd be spared me. That's why I will be not coming out the back as usual to talk to people, because I don't think it would be fair for me to spread a New Zealand bug amongst yourselves. So I may well have some coughing, I may well have to have a wee break, but we'll see how we go. So a very warm welcome to those that are here and to all those people who may be listening on the internet and watching at home. So first of all, I do want to just mention the passing of Anthony Tony Sheridan. Central Coast Council was saddened to advise that the community of the passing of Tony Sheridan, the former Mayor of Wyong Shire Council, earlier this month. Tony was 98 years old and passed away peacefully. He was surrounded by his 5 children on Friday, the 29th of September 2023. Tony served on the Wyong Shire Council for a total of 27 years, which is an amazing amount of time in this day and age, including 2 terms as the Shire President and 1 term as Mayor. He had benefited from very strong support in the community. Throughout his extensive period of service, Tony championed progressive measures for the Central Coast and was instrumental in gaining state and federal funding for several major projects for the region. Tony received high honours for his service over the years, including the Medal of the Order of Australia for service to local government and the Centenary Medal for service to the community through local government. In 2019, the Tony Sheridan Walk at the entrance opened in recognition of Tony's decades of service to the community, and Council does extend its sincere condolences to the Sheridan family and friends. Mangrove Creek Dam, earlier this month, I was there to help open the brand new Mangrove Creek Dam Visitor Centre, which has been reopened after the fires for the community to enjoy. Now that new space does offer amazing views across, I'll call it the lake, but the dam, and it also shows all the hinterland, the sort of natural landscape and so on. And it's packed with features to take the family or the kids up there, so there's playgrounds, education centre and picnic area. This site was in fact designed in partnership with our community and is a product of this successful community consultation and collaboration. And I certainly wish to thank all those community members who took part in that process and shared their vision for this revitalised site. It came out a cracker. The Lakes Festival is back from the 3rd and 12th of November, so that's this coming weekend. The huge 10-day celebration of our waterways includes 30 events at over 10 locations across the coast, with last year's event actually attracting some 20,000 people. There's a lot to see and it's attended to as part of this year's event, which include live music and performances kicking off from this Saturday. I will be there on the Saturday. I will be actually hosting a little pop-up for the council. It'll be available for a couple of hours. Anyone who wants to come and avail me of their thoughts, I'll be happy to talk to them. And for any more information about the Lakes Festival, head to the lovecentralcoast.com Lakes Festival website. Youth Week Awards. It's time to now nominate the outstanding young people in our region for the Central Coast Youth Week Awards to be held in New South Wales Youth Week in April next year. Young people do make a very significant contribution to the Central Coast community, and it's time to celebrate the efforts of our diverse, talented and ambitious young people. For award categories and to nominate, head to again centralcoast.nsw.gov.au website. And just as an aside, I just know when we did the Citizens of the Year and the Young Person of the Year, when you look at what some of those young people do and volunteer for, it's absolutely amazing. So at those volunteer ceremonies, it was just surprising to see how many young people are actually probably doing a bit more than some of the older blokes and ladies. But nonetheless, I think we have a fabulous group of young people here, so please try and get some of them recognised. Surf Lifesaving, we've managed to present a cheque for $116,000 to Surf Lifesaving Central Coast this week as part of their sponsorship partnership with us. And this is also in addition to the 6,500 individual sponsorships to each of the 15 surf lifesaving clubs across the coast. And clearly Council is pretty proud to be supporting Surf Lifesaving Central Coast, who use these funds to purchase vital equipment and expand their aquatic awareness, safety awareness programs across the region for this summer season. And hopefully we get an improvement on some of our recent summers where we have unfortunately had a number of drownings. What's on engagement? I would like to remind the community to review what's currently on engagement and to have your say on the issues that matter to you. So we're currently consulting on the Austin Butler Access Pole, Deferred Matters Lands Planning Proposal, the South Cell at Woy Woy Waste Management Facility, just to name a few. And Council's 12-month community engagement plan came through Council, if you recall, a month or two ago, and it's available on Your Voice, Our Coast for the public to see in advance of the key projects that we're consulting on throughout the year. Infrastructure updates. Council's water and sewer team have been busy working with contractors to complete an extensive works program in the Gosford CBD to support the expected growth in our principal city over the next 30 years. A friendly reminder also that Council shares a weekly social media post on recent roadworks, including pothole repairs, heavy patching and road renewal. If this is of interest to you, then make sure you're following Council's social media pages for all the updates. So with that, I will close my comments for tonight and we will commence the meeting. Item 1.1 is disclosures of interest. I don't believe we got any disclosures. Nope. So we'll go with the resolution that's shown on the screen. Item 1.2, which is confirmation of the minutes of the previous meeting. I clearly was present during that, so I can confirm that the minutes are true and accurate, and therefore will agree to resolve the resolution that is shown on the screen. Item 1.3, notice of intention to deal with matters in confidential session. There are no matters to deal with in confidential session tonight, so I will again resolve to adopt the resolution that is shown on the screen. And as we move into the substantive parts of our agenda, item 2.1 is the monthly finance report, and I think the CEO will speak to that, but he'll also cover item 2, which is the investment report.
Thank you, Mr. Administrator. The month of September saw Council return an operating surplus of $5.9 million for the month, as opposed to a monthly estimate of a $1.2 million surplus. This then produces a year-to-date actual of $8.4 million surplus for the first quarter, compared to a phased estimate of a deficit of $3.6 million for the period. So this then shows a better than budgeted outcome of $12 million for the first quarter. Whilst we continue to refine our budget phasing, I like to compare how we are travelling compared to the same point last year. The same point last year, Council was running a $10.9 million surplus compared to the current $8.4 million. Now, we should also remember that last year's financial final result was bolstered by a larger than normal Commonwealth Financial Assistance Grant. This additional $18.4 million will no doubt be discussed later when we consider the audited statements for the 2022-23 year. So what we can see are trends that are better than budget, a little less strong than last year, and we should remember that last year's result was bolstered by a one-off grant payment. Consequently, Council's operating performance at this point is satisfactory and we're closely monitoring it. Unrestricted cash is positive except for a small negative balance in the water fund, which is able to be covered by unrestricted funds held in general fund. The key ratios as outlined by the Office of Local Government are shown on page 17 of the report. They're all in positive territory except for the small negative restricted cash in water fund, as I said, able to be covered by positive funds, unrestricted funds in general fund. The Administrator and interested community members would be aware that to bolster Council's liquidity, in late 2020, Council took out 2 emergency loans, one of $50 million and another of $100 million. The larger of these loans renews in December with an outstanding balance of $82 million. An important recommendation contained in this report is that as a result of Council's continued strong financial performance, the Council will be in a position to bolster its emergency loan repayment restricted fund, which is currently holding $55 million, with sufficient funds over the next 2 months to be able to fully repay this loan in December this year. This is important in that the repayment of this loan will free up free cash flow for Council to use on other priorities, but also that the loan, if not repaid, would reset at a significantly higher interest rate than is currently being charged. This will then leave the smaller of the two emergency loans, and a future report will consider how we will manage this second loan, which renews in late 2025. Improved planning and execution, together with extended good weather, has seen Council ahead of budget in delivering its capital program by approximately $3 million over the $43.8 million year-to-date estimate. We'll closely monitor this together with Council's cash reserves to determine whether we should adjust the capital budget as the year progresses. Council is currently holding $777 million in cash and investments, the majority of which is in restricted funds, which is held in a combination of investments in accordance with ministerial orders. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Farmer. It's, again, a very pleasing result on a monthly basis, and I hope it never becomes boring for people, because it is up to the community to make sure they keep the future council, true to the budget that they've set for themselves, and to make sure that they're tracking. If you have a look at the financial report, the monthly report, you will see it's very simple. It's just the P&L, or the income and expenditure, which needs to show us a small surplus, as the CEO said. And you've also got to look at the cash position to make sure there's sufficient working capital or unrestricted cash to make sure that we can cover the next sort of couple of months or 3 months of trading without necessarily getting any income. So that's critical to look at. And also, the CEO mentioned, is the capital program. We want to keep on top of that, because it's that capital program that's keeping our assets up to the spec and everything else. So those are the simple metrics you need to keep looking at, and making sure that the council keeps on track into the future. But again, a really pleasing result, and I think we've got more to say when we get to the actual financial results down the track. But with that, I will move both those items 2.1 and 2.2, and move those with the recommendations as shown on the screen. And now we move to item 2.3, which is the presentation of the 22-23 financial reports and related auditors' reports for Central Coast Council and Central Coast Council Water Supply Authority. Now, first of all, here what I will do is I will get the Director of Corporate Services, Marissa Rakomarara, to talk through the results, and then I will invite, with a procedural motion, the Auditor General's Office to speak to their views about how we went. So first of all, Ms. Rakomarara.
Thank you, Mr. Administrator. I'm really pleased to present the audited financial statements to Council and the community tonight, both because our results are positive and cement our trend to financial sustainability, and also because they're delivered with an unmodified audit opinion and within legislated timeframes. Just looking at the overall position, so for the second year in a row, we have delivered another modest surplus. This is a really important thing for the organisation moving forward, as the surplus will enable early debt repayment and ensures that we're operating within our revenue and containing our expenditure. That places us in a really strong and stable financial position, and similar to other New South Wales council, we face challenges when planning for the future, and we need to focus on financial sustainability, but we are now no different to any other New South Wales council and are in a strong position. In terms of our consolidated operating result, for 22-23, council had a budgeted surplus of just over $7 million. Council needs to plan for small surpluses to ensure that our income is sufficient to cover planned operating expenses and unexpected events, and the result was a modest surplus of $35 million. The additional surplus achieved is partly due to an unbudgeted early repayment of the financial assistance grant of $18.4 million. And this surplus will enable council to consider setting aside funds towards early repayment of the emergency loans. The graph on the screen provides an overview of the net operating result before capital grants and contributions. And you can see that the green bar is the budget and blue is the actual results. So you can see from that graph that there is a clear movement from substantial deficits in previous years to modest surpluses, and a closing gap between what we planned in terms of the budget and what we delivered in terms of actual results. In the general fund, the operating result was a surplus of $28 million. The New South Wales Audit Office has audited council's financial statements, and the audit is more than just finances. It also includes a review of IT and cybersecurity, governance processes, payroll, procurement, and asset areas. I'd like to thank all staff involved, from those working on spreadsheets to those auditing plan in the field, delivering capital projects, undertaking payroll, or implementing integrity policies, for contributing to a second year of an unmodified audit opinion, and the first one delivered within legislative timeframes. Partly as a result of achieving surpluses, council's cash position also continues to improve, with total cash increasing year on year and adequate unrestricted cash being maintained. As at June 2023, council held $760 million in total cash, with $95 million of this being unrestricted. You can see on the chart that, different to some previous years, we have maintained a sufficient amount of unrestricted cash, which is the grey bar, and the restricted cash amount has increased, mostly due to an increase in external funding that's reflected in the light blue bar, both of which are good news for council. In terms of our financial performance in debt, council has continued to reduce its total debt, including the emergency loans taken out in 2021, and they're the red bar, and have been able to set funds aside to make early repayments on these loans. The total loan balance, which is the green bar, is reducing over time, and our focus on the emergency loans will enable improved cash flow and release funds back into the budget over time. In terms of our financial performance, our ratios and benchmarking against industry, council has performed well against all of those industry benchmarks. The only benchmark not met is the rates and charges outstanding ratio. And I just want to note there that council supports ratepayers facing hardship, and this is reflected in this result, and it's something that we intend to continue. However, we are taking action to improve this performance. Council's hardship and debt recovery policy has been reviewed and is included in tonight's business paper for consideration. In the other ratios, performance has generally improved on the previous financial year, reflecting our ongoing focus on financial management. The only deviation is the own source operating revenue, which is slightly lower than the previous year due to an increase in grant funding. Thank you, Mr. Administrator.
Thank you. I will now move a procedural motion. Sorry, apologies. Yep, I took it off because I was coughing. Trying not to reflect that on you. So I now resolve to suspend standing orders to allow Ms. Karakatasanis to speak. Caroline.
Thank you, Mr. Administrator, Chief Executives and Directors of Council. Thank you for the invitation for me to present my report on the conduct of the audit of Central Coast Council 2023. I'm also here with my Audit Manager, Patrick Hall, who's been instrumental in helping me achieve the outcome we have today. Tonight I'll be taking you through the results of our 2023 financial statement audit and just a high-level snapshot of your council's financial performance compared to the industry benchmarks that are set by the Office of Local Government. But before going through this, I'd like to talk briefly just to bring your attention to the work that the Auditor General does in performance audit as well as financial audits that we report to Parliament. So I'd like you to refer you to our annual work program, 2023 to 2026. So this was released by the Auditor General in August of this year. And it really just explains our forward-looking plan as to what performance audits and financial audits we'll be looking at over the next 3 years. Just for your information, so some recent performance audits that we have published that relate to local government or councils include the regulation and monitoring of local government, So we did make some recommendations in this report that we tabled earlier this year to the regulator. We also tabled a performance audit on financial management and governance of local councils, where we looked at Mid Coast Council. The audit did identify some financial management and governance gaps, given the challenges faced by Mid Coast following the amalgamation. So this report did make some recommendations to Mid Coast, but it's actually useful for other councils to look at the recommendations to see if you can apply it to your own council. Some of these are ensuring long-term financial plans meet legislative and policy requirements, undertaking service reviews to better understand net costs to inform budget and financial planning decisions, looking at improving the quality of asset management information, for example, asset condition data, to better inform budget and financial planning decisions, to look at controls and process gaps that may be identified through your internal or external audits, and to monitor implementation of those audit findings. Going back to the annual program that I referred to, that's up on our website. Just so you know, some of the performance audits that we're planning to look at over the next year, so 23-24, include cybersecurity and local government. We've actually selected 3 councils, Parramatta, Singleton and Warrumbungle, that will be subject to this performance audit. But that will be a useful report once that's tabled to look at and see if there's any insights that you can take for your council. We're also planning to do a performance audit on road asset management, where we'll look at how effectively councils are managing their road assets. It may look at how you're collecting asset condition data, but that's quite early, and that's just on the planning for this point in time. And we're also flagging to look at coastal management reforms. So I'll now turn to our report on the conduct of the audit. So after a long process, a lot of work between both my audit team and council staff, we've now completed our audit of the general purpose financial statements for 30 June 2023. So I am pleased to say that I have issued a clean audit opinion for your council's 2023 financial statements. So this means that your financial statements contain no material statements and present fairly. So again, we've mentioned before, this really is another significant milestone for Central Coast to get their audit done on time by 31 October, meeting the statutory deadline, following a clean audit opinion that was issued last year after the qualification was removed for 30 June 2022. So I would like to thank Central Coast Management and my team again for working together to achieve this. And also, as part of the audit process, your council's Audit Risk and Improvement Committee has reviewed the financial statements and results of our audit. So while noting improvements from the prior year, I did report one high-risk matter that carried over from the prior year, however, was addressed as part of my audit. So this matter related to further improvements over the quality review of the fair value assessment process of looking at infrastructure, property, plant and equipment asset classes that aren't subject to comprehensive asset revaluations. It's also worth noting that Council did close a number of high-risk points that we raised last year. There are still some to be closed, and they're on a journey of continuous improvement. So looking at the performance ratios, which are set by the Office of Local Government, and you can see in note G61 of the financial statements, there are 6 key performance ratios that are audited within the general purpose financial statements. So as Marissa already mentioned, you have met 5 out of those 6 financial performance ratios, with rates and annual charges outstanding percentage being the one ratio not met. So looking at the income statement for your council, you did report an operating result of $146.9 million for the year ended 30 June 23, and that included depreciation and amortisation expense of $174.9 million. This was $32.8 million higher than the previous year's result. The increase is due to some of the reasons are the increase in rates and annual charges by $23.5 million. You had the rate peg increase of 1% and the water supply annual charges increase of the 23%. You also had grants and contributions revenue, $168.4 million, which increased by $46.7 million, mainly due to the increase in state funding and non-cash contributions. You had an increase of $8.1 million in developer contributions recognised during the year. And you also received 95% of the Commonwealth, the federal financial assistance grants that relate to 23-24 this year in advance, compared to 75% last year. So after deducting capital grants and contributions, the net operating results reduced to $35 million, and this was 5.1 million lower than the previous year's result of 40.1 million. So Council achieved positive operating performance ratio of 6.19% and also met this ratio in the prior year after not meeting this in 2021. So this means that Council is containing operating expenditure within revenue. However, Council did not meet the benchmark, I've already mentioned that, for the rates and annual charges outstanding, which was 6.6%, less than the 5% benchmark set by the regulator. Council continues to meet own source operating revenue ratio of 78.2% this year, which is above the benchmark set by OLG of 60%. So that means that Council is not heavily reliant on external funding. So looking at the cash position of Council, you had total cash and investments of 760.6 million. So this was up 108 million from 652.1 million last year. 30 June 2023, Council reported positive cash and investment balances of 243.2 million, so higher than 221 million last year, and that's after deducting external restrictions of 517.4 million in 23. And those external restrictions do relate mainly to developer contributions, domestic waste management, and the Water Supply Authority related funds. And then the internal allocations that are used for specific purposes by way of Council resolution, that was 147.1 million this year, which was higher than 93 million last year, mainly due to the emergency loan repayments internally allocated. So these cash levels have resulted in Council meeting the OLG benchmark for the unrestricted current ratio being 2.63 times compared to the benchmark set by the regulator of 1.5 times. So that means that the Council is able to meet its short-term obligations as they fall due. Council met the cash expense cover ratio, 8.34 months, which indicates Council can continue paying for its immediate expenses without additional cash inflow for another 8 months, which is greater than the 3 months target set by the regulator. Council met the OLG debt service cover ratio of 5.64 times in 2023 compared to the benchmark of 2 times. So overall, Council has reported sound financial results. They've met 5 out of the 6 performance ratios that have been audited and set by the regulator. And again, I'd like to thank the Administrator, Rick, CEO, David, Marissa, Emma, and all the staff for working with us as we worked through the audit process together, and it's a good outcome for Council to have the opinion signed on time and clean. So thank you.
Thank you for that. I have to say, taking my mind back 2.5 years ago, Caroline, I think we sort of met when you were still trying to get your head around the 1920 year. Didn't even, I think when Natalia and I were here, we had no idea where we were, but that was some pretty traumatic times then. But I think what's important for the community to note is that 2.5 years later, we can effectively say that the financial recovery plan has been achieved. And as the Chief Executive mentioned, the ongoing, so in other words from July 1 this year onwards, we are sort of back to, I'll call it almost business as usual. You won't see huge surpluses coming through. That's not the intent for councils to make money and hang on to it. The intention is that we collect the money and deliver the services that the community wants. So you'll see smaller budgeted surplus numbers, but we still want to obviously make a small surplus if we can, because if you like, that's the spending money into the future. As the CEO mentioned, if we are able, and I think we're well and truly on track, to complete repayment of the $100 million loan by the end of this financial year, that will mean that within 3 years, we'll have discharged all the debt situation that we accumulated, apart from one $50 million loan, which the CEO's got more plans for to try and reduce, which I can only applaud. So we will be leaving this council in very good shape for when a new elected body comes in September next year. So I'm delighted with that. The other thing, 2 things I do need to say is thank you, Caroline, and your team, because it's been a fabulous achievement to actually get us over the line, I'll put it that way, because we can do most of the work, but unfortunately you have to do some of the work as well. And the heavy lifting you guys did to actually get us without qualification, on time, I think is fabulous. Also, credit goes to Marissa and Emma, the CFO, and the financial team, because clearly together they've worked well and got that done. And I have to say my own private thoughts is we'd never get there this year, but thank God I was wrong. You guys did it. So congratulations to you all. And hopefully the community can feel somewhat relieved that we've achieved the objectives and we're moving forward now. And hopefully things will never go back to that state of affairs. With that, I shall now move the resolutions that are shown on the screen to adopt the 22-23 financial results, audited financial results. Now with that, we'll move on to item 2.4, and again, which is the hardship and debt recovery policy. And I'll just remind you that you'll note that the metrics that we didn't make or didn't reach was in fact that overdues on rates and what's the other thing? Yeah, that one. Anyway, I'm going to get Marissa to sort of just explain the changes we're making, which will hopefully make it clearer and better for the community when they've got to apply for something, and also enable us to be able to meet that metric down the track.
Thank you, Mr. Administrator. This report presents a draft hardship and debt recovery policy for public exhibition. As noted in my presentation on the financial statements, maintaining an appropriate focus on minimising outstanding rates and charges enables council to secure cash flow to fund operations and ensures that members of the community are not bearing the burden of others. This policy will provide a framework to assist ratepayers experiencing financial difficulties in making payment of rates, annual charges and other fees, and to undertake efficient and effective debt recovery. And it has been developed within the applicable legislative boundaries. It is council's intent to work proactively with ratepayers who are experiencing genuine financial hardship to establish payment plans in the first instance and thereby avoid legal action. Consistency and fairness will be applied when assessing hardship applications. At the same time, timely and cost-effective action will be taken when ratepayers refuse to pay without genuine reasons and are placing the burden on other ratepayers. The debt recovery process has been reviewed to be more streamlined and cost-effective. This will ensure that council has sufficient money to operate effectively and to meet relevant industry benchmarks. The policy also includes improvements to how the council manages other outstanding amounts not related to rates. The draft hardship and debt recovery policy will be put out on public exhibition for 28 days to enable the community to provide feedback before being presented back to council. Thank you.
Thank you. So that draft hardship and debt recovery policy will go out for the 28 days exhibition, so feel free to make comments on it and send those comments in. So with those comments from Marissa, I will now move the recommendations that are shown on the screen. We'll move to item 2.5, which is the Central Coast Conservation Fund policy. And Dr. Howe, I believe you're going to make a few comments about this.
Thank you, Mr. Administrator. The Central Coast Conservation Policy seeks to establish the Central Coast Conservation Fund for investment in management of council's natural assets. The draft Central Coast Conservation Policy was exhibited from the 24th of May to the 4th of July this year, and 3 public submissions were received, of which 1 was relevant to the policy. The Davistown Progress Association and Council's Coastal Open Space System Committee also provided feedback into the design of the exhibited draft policy. It's proposed that the specific application of the Davistown Wetlands Acquisition Fund be considered at a later meeting of Council, in part due to the ongoing deliberations around the future use of Allura Reserve at Davistown. The policy recommended for adoption has been amended to include an additional section 4.4 to specifically exclude the Protection of the Environment Trust from its scope. Following internal discussion, the wording of section 5 has also been simplified to better capture all contribution streams that may be directed to the fund. Thank you.
So thank you, Dr. Howe. Well, it's nice to see this come back and now being finalised. Obviously, I strongly support it. I think getting it all in one place is entirely sensible. I also think it's very important, and anybody from Davistown, be very clear that your money that you believe is sort of rightfully yours is going to be the subject of an extra paper to the council. So I'm assured by the staff that the decisions for that will be made at a later date. So it is still quarantine, don't get alarmed. With that, I shall move those recommendations to complete item 2.5 as shown on the screen. Item 2.6, which is a nice little thing to be doing, acquisition of land for a public purpose at 235 Scenic Drive, Kalongra, and I'm going to ask Brett Shearer, who's the acting Director of Community and Recreation.
Turn that on, do it?
Yeah, you just got to put that on, I
Sorry.
forgot.
Thank you,
Don't
Mr
worry,
Administrator.
we'll do it.
We've got a small presentation with a few photos to give an update of what Kalongra Sports Facility is. Kalongra Sports Facility has long been in the planning to build in the north of the Central Coast an extra sporting facility. With the increase in use, especially female sports and overage sports, there is becoming more pressure on our sporting facilities, and this is one that we're looking to build. As you can see by the photo up on the screen, it's a multi-sport design, so it can take cricket, rugby league, soccer, AFL, most turf sports, and netball/basketball courts has 3 of those, and we can even mark them up pickleball courts, which seems to be a big thing happening these days. Like most sports fields, it's going to be set up properly these days with car parking, proper amenities building, and play space. Next. The site where proposal land acquisition is on Scenic Drive at Kalongra, just west of the Buff Point roundabout, not far from Budgie Boys Soccer Club, as in that photo. Next. And just up here, so I guess the next steps is to finalise the land purchase. Now, if we get a resolution from council today, we'll finalise the land purchase, review the detailed designs. So we've already done preliminary detailed designs, engineering drawings ready for this. As I said, this has a long time been on the cards. Review the approvals, tender for construction, appoint the contractor and move forward with the construction, aiming to have it finished within hopefully 2 years. Thank you, Mr Administrator.
Thank you, Mr. Shearer. Well, I think it's just fantastic for the people of the Greater Marmora area to be getting that facility. It's probably long overdue. We are getting more people starting to want to live up that part of the world. We clearly need to provide some of these types of facilities. So it's a good thing that the former Wyong Council did that long-term lease back in 2014. And now, through the auspices of a grant from the state government and through our own monies, we're actually able to put this deal on the table and actually make it happen. So I think we're talking about 24, 25, we might be able to have it into the budget and actually be happening. So look, a great outcome, I think, for the community getting that in situ. And it just goes to show that we can acquire things as well as actually sell assets. By the way, I will now move all those motions that are associated with that particular item and make those as a decision of council. Item 2.7 and 2.8 we're going to consider together because they're acquisitions. So Mr Bolgoff, I think, is going to just briefly explain what they're for.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Administrator. Both those items are associated with land acquisitions. Item 2.7 relates to the acquisition of 2 small parcels of land in front of number 71 and 73 Breezy Street, Peats Ridge. This is to ensure that the road formation is within the new road reserve. In relation to item 2.7, this identifies that council is acquiring land where the existing road has been built and we're swapping surplus land in its place at Little Jillaby Road, Little Jillaby. This process necessitates a process to undertake a partial road closure. The road closure does not impact on the current functioning of the road network. Thank you, Mr Administrator.
Thank you, Mr Bolgoff. They're pretty simple acquisitions. The owners of the lands concerned are quite comfortable without the agreement, and they're relatively small numbers. So very happy to just sort of sort that out for you, Boris, and we'll make those for items 2.7 and 2.8. We'll move those together and make those as the recommendation of council as shown on the screen. We'll move to item 2.9, which is the Council Services Union Picnic Day 1 December 23 and Christmas 23, New Year 24 closure. So with that, the picnic day is set by the award. So as an organisation, we have no choice over that because there is a local government New South Wales award that applies to all the staff, a large majority of the staff, right across all the councils in New South Wales. It's in the award. We don't have a choice. So we're just advising of what day that is and what services will be available on that particular day. The second part of it was we typically, over the last 2 or 3 years, have been closed for 2 weeks at Christmas. We're now only going to be closed for 1 week at Christmas, which means there'll be better access to services in that first week of January than there might have been previous to that. And you can find all that detail out on the website as to what's open, what's not open, and all the rest. Is also in the paper if you're interested. So with that, I'm going to move those recommendations that are displayed on the screen. Item 2.10, the proposed council meeting dates. We've put those down there for next year. You will note that come August next year, that council meeting will be in the caretaker period, so there will be no major decisions being made at that particular council meeting. And then the September one is pushed out because we have the election on the 14th, and I think we're talking about, or the CEO is talking about an extraordinary meeting which will bring that new council together on the 8th of October. So I guess if you like, there's about another, after Christmas, there's about another 7 months of my tenure, and thereafter as it comes back to an elected body. So look forward to that, and with that we'll note those ordinary council meeting dates as shown on the screen. Item 2.11, the protection of the environment, the trust, that's a recommendation from the trust to fund $12,000 to McMaster's Bush Care to undertake bush regeneration activities on the council. So in accordance with the way things work, I'm happy to accept that recommendation and release that money, $12,000 to go to McMaster's Bush Care. So with that, I'll support the recommendation as shown on the screen. Item 2.12, which is recommendations from the Coastal Open Space COS regarding Council's revised draft dogs and open space action plan. I think Dr. Howe's just going to say a couple of comments on that one.
Thank you. Yes, at the meeting of 5th of September, Council's COS committee resolved to recommend to Council that its views on the draft Dogs in Open Space action plan be considered as a submission on that draft document. The COS committee's submission recommends that the dog off-leash area at Allura Reserve Davistown be decommissioned due to threats impacts on threatened species. I note that there has been some public concern about both the recommendation and the remit of the COS committee to make it. I can confirm that it is within the terms of reference for the COS committee to make a recommendation to Council that its views be considered as a submission on such a policy matter before Council. The recommendation simply asks Council to note the COS committee's position and consider it along with all of the other submissions on the draft Dogs in Open Space action plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Howe. I think it's a very important point to note that committees advising council are just that. The only decision body is the council. So a committee cannot make a decision for the council. What they can do, and what they do, and in this case is a good example, as a committee, they are recommending to council to do something. Now, as this is out for consultation, it will be considered, as Dr. Howe said, it will now be considered as, along with all the other submissions, to the dogs off-leash discussion. So that rests with the staff, and that will come back as a paper sometime in the reasonably near future. So with that, I will move the recommendations to accept to accept it as a recommendation to council, but it is not a decision of council. So with that, I will move that one and move on to, I think we must be 2213. We're moving through them tonight. And again, I'm going to do 3 for 1 this time around. Mr. Shearer, we've got 3 community grants programs, and I thought it might be helpful if Mr. Shearer actually explained the 3 programs that we have. We have one that comes up regularly, sort of almost on a monthly basis, but the other 2 are on an annual basis. So we have 3 programs, totaling about 900,000, but I'll let Mr. Shearer go through these programs and when you need to apply for them, because I think a lot of people somehow miss the timing for applying.
Thank you, Mr. Administrator. So the Community Grants Program, Council plays a critical role in strengthening our community, supporting local community groups and organisations to deliver worthwhile projects, programs and events. Council offers 3 different grant programs to the community. The Community Supports Grants Program, which are smaller grants of about up to $5,000 each. Community Development Grant Program and the Community Events and Place Activation Programs, which are both up to $20,000 each. All 3 programs have $300,000 in it this financial year. 2 of the grants, which I'll get to, are one-off, so you get to apply for them at the start of the year, and we go through and assess them, and the other grant comes up non-stop. You can apply for it as you go through the year. Grassroots groups, organisations offering the pulse of the community and the glue that holds the community together. These groups need advice, support and small amounts of funding to get going, keep going and continue to provide much needed support programs, activities and events to the community. In the pictures up there, we've got a couple, Five Lands Walk, which is a very popular walk that's been going for a number of years, and the Gosford Youth Regatta. Without the small amounts of funding from the grants program, many of the supported activities would never get off the ground. The value of the service programs, event activities that these groups provide, the volunteers they attract and the impact on the community would be lost. Grant funding community-based programs, activities and events contribute to tackling the root causes of costly social issues, which is in turn saves vital dollars for ratepayers and the government. In economic terms, an analysis undertaken indicates we get 8 to 1 return on our investment for every dollar council allocates through this grant program. We receive effectively $8 in value. And this was another picture of the China-Australia friendships. Next page. So as a breakdown, the 3 grants, they're up there. So far this year, if these recommendations are adopted, we've put $124,609 of the community support grants out to the community, 29,808 in this round out of the 300,000, noting there's still 8 months to go. So anyone who wants to apply for community support grants up to $5,000 can do so still. We had 9 applications this round, 8 have been supported, and in the report it tells you why some of them were not supported. Some of them are either ineligible or have been redirected to other grants. And while there, as you'll see, we had 119 applicants this round, and all the money was allocated, so there was some that had to be prioritised. So we ended up funding, 51 of the grants to the value of nearly $630,000. We've got a couple of short videos, only about a minute, just over a minute each, which show some of the past programs we've funded. We'll put up on the big screen.
One of the hardest things when you're in addiction or homelessness is you lose all your self-worth, and it's a really hard place to get out of. But it's through that unconditional love that we can break down the barriers with people, we can help people break addiction. We can use our own life stories of an example that you can do better, and we like to use that as an example of hope that people really just show that you can change your life. My name's Jed Clark. I'm the team leader of the Father's Table. We operate here in Wyman Town Park. It's a beautiful Central Coast, and we provide Friday night pizza in the park, people in need, and Sunday lunches, and currently provide food hampers. With the hampers, what we've worked on is that people will have a pre-cooked meal. They'll also have a meal they can prepare at home, so they'll get pasta to our mince and sauce. We make sure that they've got an apple, an orange, and a banana in each one. With the help of council, we've been able to take our hampers up to between $20 and $30 each, and they're doing it for $50 a week. It's the partnership that we have with council to be investing into the community in this way. It's not all just about people who are paying rates. It's about caring about the bloke who's sleeping under the building up the road. It's a partnership with council. The words that I really love to hear from people is that they love coming back because they feel loved. We all hit hard times, and so we should all be there to pick people up. And it's awesome when somebody comes up and says, guess what, I've got a job. It doesn't happen all the time, but if it happens once a year, it's worthwhile.
And there's just one more.
When we first started, I used to get more phone calls of women inquiring about the man shed than the men themselves, because they wanted to get the old man out of the house and get into the shed. I'm Bruce Wall. I'm the founding member of the Manor Men Shed, and I'm currently the vice president of the shed. The men shed is really all about men's health, men's comfort. Look, we've got boilermates, we've got engineers, we've got a lawyer here, we've got them all. It was something that we really needed when I first moved here. I didn't know anybody. And we've got guys here that lived here for 7 years and didn't know anybody. And now, just look, there's 58 guys from around here that never knew each other. And when people joined, they could see the joy it brought them and the community and the comradeship that it gave the guys that come here. So with the money that we get from the grants, it allows us to buy extra equipment. You really need it because you can't have 20 odd guys standing around waiting to get on one machine. The broader community will know we're here because we do a lot in the community. We put all the gym equipment into the local school. We do the school playground. And the legends on it, put a barbecue down there. So we help the community a lot. The Manor mentioned to me is probably one of the biggest achievements in my life.
So thank you, Mr. Administrator. That's just a couple of examples of what we do with some of the money.
Thank you, Simon. Three programs that go on one program goes on throughout the year. The other two actually come up in the month preceding the year. So it's important to note that in June next year, the two big programs will come up for applications so that they can be paid out from July 1 onwards through the assessment. So just want people to be aware of that because people sometimes think we're into next year, I will apply, but actually, in fact, they've missed the boat already. So just that was the first point. The second thing, I think it's just so worthwhile looking at Jed and Bruce speaking about what they actually do with the money. It's just amazing how much they impact upon other people, help other people, which we could never do. But those volunteers out there, and I know I go on about them, but they really are the lifeblood of keeping the coast on its feet and through some dark and difficult times. So you heard what particularly Jed had to say out here in Wyong at the back, where he's meeting people who are in dire need and helping them, and becomes little communities, people to talk to, because that's one of the things, loneliness and somebody to talk to all the way. Anyway, all of these things in different ways make a big difference in the community. So it's a great thing I think the council's able to do. It's a total of just under $1 million, and I certainly hope that the council's in a position to be able to continue those into the future. With those, I shall move the individual recommendations for items 2.13, 2.14 and items 2.15 on block and make those as a decision of council. We now move to item 2.16, which is a quarterly report, and I think it's very brief, isn't it, Dr. Howe?
Yes, it is, Mr. Administrator. This is the standard quarterly report to Council for the period from the 1st of July to the 30th of September this year. During this period, 660 development applications were lodged with Council, with 549 of these determined. Of those 549 DAs, 6 or 1.1% had a variation to the relevant development standards. All 6 of these applications were determined by staff by way of approval, with variations to either the height control or the floor space ratio of less than 10%. Thank you.
Thank you, and with that I shall move the recommendations shown on the screen for 2.16 and make those a decision of council. Item 2.17 is a submission to the inquiry into the performance of the Regional Investment Activation Fund and Regional Job Creation Fund. Dr. Howe.
Just to note, Mr. Administrator, that the proposed submission focuses on the impact of New South Wales Government funding programs on local government resource constraints and the complexities of the planning process. Thank you.
Yes, it's an interesting one, this, because there's no free lunch out there. And whilst we get a lot of help from our federal and state colleagues through these programs. First thing to note in here is that the state government is dealing directly with businesses. The council actually doesn't play a part in that. But as a general type of thing, generalism, having money from the state government actually means that we have to do an awful lot of work. And we end up costing us. So as I said, it's not free when we get the money because we have to do the work, the staff have to do it, the planning issues, we have the environmental issues, we have the consultation, all of that stuff often we have to carry out, and the state does not fund us for that. It's also important to note that from a financial point of view, that when we get some of these grants, and I have to say both the Commonwealth and the state have been pretty good about that of late, as we require monies that go towards helping our renewal of our assets rather than giving us a new asset. Get a new asset, and as the Auditor General representative said, when you get more assets and get them, you have to charge the depreciation. So that's why our P&L last year had to change a little bit from what we calculated, because the Auditor General said you've got some assets which weren't on the list, so to speak. So very important when we're given the stuff, it's not free, we have to pay for it one way or another. So with that as part of our submission to the state government on that, and it's something that local government as a generalism has been banging on about for a very long time. With that, I'm going to just adopt the resolution that's shown on the screen for the CEO to make that as a formal council submission. Item 2.18, another submission to inquire into the impacts of climate change on the environment and communities. Dr. Howe again.
Thank you. This item was included in Council's supplementary agenda. It's a recommendation to make a submission to the New South Wales Parliament's inquiry into the impacts of climate change on the environment and communities. The proposed submission focuses on the impact of communities associated with flooding, sea level rise, heat stress and bushfire hazards, all of which are expected to be exacerbated by climate change. The submission notes the impact of climate change on local biodiversity values and the current conflict between planning controls in local planning instruments and the conservation of areas of high biodiversity value. The submission recommends that the New South Wales Government pursue strategic biocertification of certain lands to manage these conflicts. Also note, Mr Administrator, that you've received representation from a constituent requesting that the submission include information about Council's current climate resilience activities. To address that request, staff propose that the recommendation be amended to add a new section to the submission as shown on the screen.
Thank you, Dr. Howe. Yes, I did receive a note from a member of the public, and I hope the member of the public I can't name them for privacy reasons, but I hope the members are listening, and notes that we have taken some note, and the staff were good enough to come back with a little bit of added to the submission. So from a process point of view, I will now resolve to adopt the resolution as displayed on the screen and include an item 2, which words are to be included in that submission to go to the state government. I would also make just the comment that I think the state government has made a good decision in limiting the amount of areas for development in the Hunter region. I mean, we all heard through those disastrous floods and saw the pictures. It just seems crazy to me that you allow people to build in those areas. So I will commend the state government for actually making that move to say, no, you aren't going to build in some of that land. So that's good. We, of course, have a lot of land as well, so we will await the state government's moves. With that, I will approve those two resolutions for item 2.18, as shown on the screen. We move to the last item, which is 2.19, which is disclosure of interest returns for the period of 1 July 22 to 30th June 23. So designated persons inside the organisation, which is executives, CEO, myself and so on, we have to disclose our pecuniary interests and other matters, and that includes the members of the Central Coast Local Planning Panel, and we have to put those in and they become a matter for the public record. So with that, we will now resolve to adopt that resolution as shown on the screen. And at 7:29, so literally 1 hour after we started, I'm going to close down and give my voice a rest. Thank you for coming along tonight. And there's nothing up the top, as I said earlier, because I don't want you to catch my bugs.